You went to school, you went to the prestigious gymnasium in Warsaw. The language was Russian, because you know the history. In that time, at the end of the 19th century, that part of Poland belonged to Russian Empire. And the south of Poland belonged to the Hungarian, Austrian Empire, and the east of Poland and the west of Poland belonged to the Habsburg, the German. So in that time, Poland didn't exist. So he went to the gymnasium, and he said to his parents, when he was later, he studied very well, okay? And then at the end, his father and mother asked, so now you have to choose for university. Yes. In that families, you have to go, you need to go to university. And then he said, yes, I want to be a doctor for children. But his father said, what? What is that? That is not a good profession. You should choose for another, more prestigious profession. But he said, no. I really want to go to study medicine in university. And he did. And he insisted. But ladies and gentlemen, what happened then? He was a boy, always living in a very protective and wealthy atmosphere. But he didn't know, he didn't realize that in the center of Warsaw, there was a big, huge community of Jews living in the old center. But that was one of the biggest Jewish community in Europe. Only in Warsaw lived more than 350,000 Jews. And most of them were poor. And there was a lot of violence in the family. And there was alcoholism. And when he started to be a student of medicines, he had for the first time go to that part of the city. He had to do some practices in polyclinics and maybe in hospitals, and he had to work together with other doctors as a co-assistant. And when he saw the poverty and the misery in the old center of Warsaw, it was already a kind of ghetto, he was in shock. Because what did he notice? What did he see? He saw what the life of the families, but especially the situation and the bad situation of children. Children were beaten, children were in very bad medical situations. And there was, I told you, a lot of people lost their work, or they had alcoholism, etc. And what did the government? The government put the children out of the families and put them in very big, awful children's houses, orphanages, but there were a lot of awful social orphans. And he also, Janusz Korczak, I shall tell you why he changed his name. This goldsmith, this Korczak, went also did these children's houses. And what he saw, what he discovered there, made him very angry. What is going on here? These children are okay, they are from poor families, but they are human beings. And why you treat these children without respect? You treat them as animals. And then he had an idea. Can we build, together with other people, a complete new children's house? because he wanted to prove that children with a very bad background has the possibilities, has the capacities, the abilities to be just persons with a good self-esteem and power and initiatives. So he started to collect money. He did crowdfunding. He went to Jewish rich companies, to families, and step by step they found the money. In the meantime, he was himself, he finished his study, and he was a famous doctor. Already then in the Baumann Children's Hospital in Warsaw. And when, after 2-3 years, they collected the money, they had the money, he said to an architect, build a wonderful house for children, with a playground, with a nice place inside, with windows and etc. And when the building was finished, there it is. And you cannot imagine, ladies and gentlemen, but this building still exists. The top was ruined by the Germans. There was a lot of, you know, the situation in Warsaw. The whole city was burned and that. But this little house survived. And after the war, it was restored, and it is still a Janusz Korczak orphanage in Warsaw. And what he did, and everybody said, you are completely crazy. You are stupid. He decided to stop, to finish his work as doctor in the Baumann Hospital, and he said, okay, I will live there in the attic, that little room. I will be the leader, the director of this house. And everybody said, you are crazy. You have a fantastic position. Everybody knows you. How can you live there with these poor children? Yes, he said. I want to prove that if we have a special education and special approach to children, they can be really human beings. And so he did. And then he started to find people, group leaders, people for the kitchen, people for the garden. He collected a whole team. And he said to everybody who want to work there, I ask you only one thing. You should respect children. And you should realize that if you look in the eyes of a child, you look not like this, but you look like what Emmanuel Levinas said, if you looked on this equal level to a child, and if you really do that, you respect child as an equal person, then you can educate children. And what happened then? In the meantime, he used always his name, Janusz Korczak, instead of Goldsmith, because when he was a student, he wrote an interesting story, a kind of concourse in Warsaw for all students to send a little story. And he liked to write stories, already when he was young. And he sent the text, and he had the second prize in whole Warsaw. And when he sent this text, he said, okay, what shall I do? Goldsmith? No. Let's use just a normal Polish name, Jan Jansen, Janusz Korczak. Young children as teenagers always do that. So from that moment, he used always his writer's name, Janusz Korczak. So, it started in that year. And first came 50 children, then 100 children, and at the end there were more than 150 children in this house. And it was of course a mess, and he was a doctor. He was not a pedagogue. So in the beginning he made a lot of mistakes. And then he, every night, there, in the attic, he was writing his diary and his text, a special, everyday observations of children. He said to everybody in the house, write every day some lines about what your observations or your talks or your experiences with children. Do it every day. And so, that was the life of Don Giraud. But why? Everybody, so many people, from Paris, from London, from Berlin, from Amsterdam, from Belgium, came to visit this house. Because it was, in a couple of years, it was famous all over Europe. You see, people called it the Republic of Children. Because he said, okay, you can say you have to respect children. You have to give them responsibility. You have to give them initiatives. But how can you organize that? And then he started a community, and that was very, very unbelievable, new for that time. The first thing he said, I want to talk with children. I want to know about their life, about their sorrow, about their happiness. How can I know all these things with children? So he organized a children's parliament. Every week, children from every group, they had different groups, came to him, and he was sitting in a circle and he was talking with the children. And he took this parliament very, very serious. If there were to take very serious decisions in the organization of the house, he always asked the children, what do you think about it? And I can tell you, it's a real story. Last year, in Amsterdam, I had my last talks with a very old man. He was about 99 years old. And he was a pupil, a child, in the Dutch Janusz in Warsaw. He was a child in the orphanage. And he survived the Holocaust. And he immigrated finally to Holland. And he lived in Amsterdam. And I knew that he was a student or pupil of Janusz Korczak. So I had many talks with this man. Oral history. He was his memory was fantastic. And he told me about how Korczak were taking all the children very, very seriously. And he said, oh, sometimes there was a telephone call from Paris or from Berlin. Can we come to visit your orphanage? Because we know it is very well known and important and famous. And Korczak said, okay, I have to discuss it with my children's board. And they will decide if it is convenient or not. And this old man, Rotenstein, his name was, said, Theo, many times the children's court decided, no, this time not, no, that's not convenient. So he had to call Paris. The children had decided we have to cancel it or to postpone it. And he did it on many fronts. He even had a children's court. The children from 14 and 15 years old could talk with young children if there was a problem, maybe it was bullying, maybe some children were fighting, maybe some children destroyed some possessions. And then on Saturday morning there was a children's court, where children come for the court. He had a children's newspaper. Oh yes, you see, it was the situation in that time. All pictures, fortunately, after the Holocaust, after the Shoah, we found, fortunately, some photo pictures, because you know, Warsaw was completely, and the ghetto was completely destroyed. But some friends had some photo pictures. This is the dining room, and it still exists. If you now go there to visit this orphanage, you will be here your lunch. And she had here the little review, the newspaper, and only children could write in this newspaper. It was the first newspaper in Europe, maybe in the world. Every week on Friday there was a special page in the official newspaper, let's say the daily news in Poland, and there was a special newspaper page with the children's newspaper. He liked music, he liked theater, he liked cultural life. It was for him so important. He said, and Christopher will convince that if a child has the possibility to play, to make music, to sing, to make theater, cultural life is amazing for children. It gives them a fantastic feeling of, it is important for their development and self-esteem. This was some of his co-workers, and together with Stefania Winzuska, she was the mother of the orphanage. And she had a summer camp. She went with the children to a summer place out in the countryside in Poland. This is some of his colleagues. The third man on the right is Korczak. Talking with children. He wrote a lot of books for children, still edited in Europe and published next year. No, this year we have a new book in Dutch, one of his famous children books, and what he wrote a lot. Janusz Korczak, Helma, and then we have a lot of books now in Dutch, and of course there are all the books are in English, and in French, and German, etc. The famous biography, The King of Children by Betty Lifton. She lives in New York. But then, ladies and gentlemen, I have to finish my part, and it is a tragedy. It was a fantastic time, and all children and all everything was happy. But you know, in the 20s, there was already a lot of anti-Semitism in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, in Russia, in white Belarus. But when in 1933 Hitler came to the power in Germany, then the situation for the Jews in Eastern Europe became terrible. And all of you know that from that time on, thousands and thousands of Jews immigrated to the West, to Belgium, to Holland, to France, and a lot of them to South America, Argentina, Brazil. And people, co-workers, came to Korczak and said, sorry, Pan Doctor, she called it Pan Doctor, sorry, we have to leave. It was later. She arrived in Treblinka. The children had to put their toys and their knuffels all their belongings they had to put on the platform. And she had to walk with Korczak and the other people to the room, a building. And she had there to go to put out all their clothes, because the Germans said, now you have to go to the shower. But it was not a shower. She came in the gas chamber, and in 20 minutes all of them were killed. And after that, burned in a crematorium. That's the end of Korczak. But if you come there now, you see there a green grass field. And you see in the middle, in that field, 200 white stones, symbolizing the 200 children. And in the middle, you see the big stone. Here she had to wait on the terrible Umschlagplatz. And there is now the monument and the stones with his big stone. Is that the end of Korczak? No, because after the war, after the Shoah, after the Holocaust, many people who worked with him, who were in his children's house, or were colleagues, or he said, what he did for children, what he did with children, how he respected children, we should not forget. And his pedagogy, his pedagogical and humanistic ideas are so important and so up to date, we should bring it to everybody. And nowadays, we have more than 25 Korczak associations all over the world. In Russia, in Israel, in Germany, in Poland, everywhere, in big organization in Brazil, everywhere. And everywhere she worked with children and gave children the opportunity to be strong, to be active participation, to give active participation, and to give children responsibility. And how can I characterize Korczak's pedagogy? Helma will go more in detail, but I give you some words. What Korczak said, and you can read it on this paper. The main ideas of Korczak are in this paper. I made a short introduction for you. You have it if it's okay. But Korczak said, and that is what Christopher also said this morning, believe in children because children has power. He has power. He believed in children and he gave the children confidence. Even in the ghetto diary, during the ghetto, he wrote in his diary, this day I learned something new from children. It is not easy to be an educator, because you have to go back to yourself. If you cannot remember what it is that you played as a young child, if you cannot remember what it was when you for the first time climbed in a tree, if you cannot go back to your youth, you cannot be an educator. So the first thing he said, if you want to educate children, if you will bring up children, go first back to yourself. Okay, it is all in this text. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo. Thank you. So it's impossible just to mention all the implications that I think we found in so many years reading about Korczak, reading from Korczak. There are just too many. But certain things I would like to share with you, which is, for instance, Korczak proclaimed children's rights before even the United Nations had any rights proclaimed for children yet. Yeah, we had human rights after World War II, but we didn't have yet children's rights. And Korczak said, well, together with some friends, even people from other countries, he said, I proclaim 3 rights at least. First, of course, the general right to respect. And the way he put it, it was, we should respect the hard labor of growing up. We think it's just something that goes naturally, but it's hard work for children. And only once, I really realized what he meant. I met a woman in a plane, and she had this little baby. He couldn't walk yet. It was a baby, I think, 6 months old. And the baby was crawling, and the mother watched it and said, oh, I always think it's hard having that unhandled body. And it was such a, thinking differently. Usually we say, oh, we love children so much, and babies are particularly to cuddle. And she said, oh, having a body that doesn't walk yet. Wow, that's hard labor. So some people maybe look the way that Korczak should have done it as well. Respect for the child for its hard labor of growing up. And then 3 other rights came from that. The child's right to be what he or she is. Maybe we think, well, of course, every child can be what it is. Going back to, for instance, my question to you, Brian, we were thinking of talents, and then I was thinking Korczak would have said, well, if you have an oak, you can never turn it into a pineapple tree, you know? So what a child is, it's something to be respected instead of trying to change anything. And so, in education, for instance, when we want standard children, because we have standard tests, we do something awful to children. They are all different, and we are paid, someone said once, to let all the talents of children flourish, let them all be different from each other, and not being standardized whatsoever. I think this is a right that is violated a lot, particularly in our educational system. The child's right to the present day. It is also one of those things we think, okay, yeah, it's present day. But listen, how many adults will tell the child, you go to school because later then you have more possibilities for a better job. Well, today it's snowing. Korczak works somewhere, but it's snowing, you go outside, let the children play with the first snow that year. Of course you cannot just sit and do mathematics when the snow starts falling. You live today. And the children, he said, they are particularly younger children, are the children of today. What is interesting today shouldn't be offered to something maybe in the future might be of any use for you. What is now useful is for children interesting. And again in education, you listen that I am from education, when we always tell children that today is not important, we are not trying to make something very interesting for now. No, we just think, practice something and then later you might be able to use it. I think that's very un-childish, and Korczak saw this already. The child's right to his own debt. Oops. We are puzzling with this right. We certainly are. But he really meant the way he formulated this here. You see, this first slide Theo showed was the saloon child. The saloon child who is always, you have to behave, you have to not to be dirty, and you should not take any risks because then your clothes might tear or something there. So you always behave. And the children are protected against any risk. You know, when you listen to some parents nowadays, being overprotected to children, even when one child slides down a hill with snow and something goes wrong, the child dies, then the community will forbid every child to slide down snowy hills. Did you read that in the paper? I mean, we went that way. It happened in the United States. And then we forbid children, one of those things that are so very interesting for children, sliding down that hill when it snows. And then the community wants to forbid it because it can go wrong. So Korczak meant really, the way he put it was, we are so afraid of losing our children that we prevent them from really living. That's how he meant it. And of course, Korczak had a lot more experience with children dying than we ever had. And one of those quotes Korczak, I remember, did was, the child is usually more realistic when he's terminal, that this is really the end. And the parents don't want to let go. But listen to the child, usually they are more realistic about their own death. So also that was meant by the child's right to its own death. Here we hear Korczak was a radical pedagogue, he really was. For instance, left on the top part, without children's active participation, we can't accomplish anything. Let's say we sit down and say, okay, now we're going to do something very, very important, cooperative learning, yes? And we as a team of teachers decide that's what we are going to do. Nothing can be accomplished when they are not agreeing with us. So maybe that's why Korczak would have said, oh yes, are we going to do that? Independently learning, you know, some really interesting, innovative ideas. Korczak would always say, let's see what the children think about it. Because we are not going to accomplish anything without them. It's a practical but also a very ideological thing. They are in power of their own lives. That's taking them seriously and respecting them. He blames adults for how they were raising children. Let's see. This idyllic childhood time is so much embittered by adults that children reach adulthood as rules. Think about it. I think it's still a lot of truth in there. We put children in nice stylish uniforms and we think they love us, respect us and trust us. I mean, that's his first mistake. He mentioned that somewhere. The first time he went with summer camp with the children, he said, okay, they don't love me because I take nice things and goodies with me for them, and they wouldn't love me. Oh, no, they didn't. We think they are innocent, grateful and brilliant. Well, they are most of the time not. Korczak found out the only way that you can deal with children is when you are doing it together. Not, I tell you to do this, I tell you to do that, only when we are together talking with each other and not to each other. And the child, he said, is not your possession. Everyone thinks, ah, it's mine, nice baby. No, the child is from itself. So if you realize that it's not your possession because it's another human being, and a human being is never possession of someone else, since we stopped with slavery. So also children have the right not to be a possession of anyone. They are themselves. So think about it. Why do we trim our children's healthy, natural urges just because they don't meet our ideals? I have my child and I want it to be such and so, and I don't watch. I don't see what are the children from themselves. Maybe they are something else that we want. They have the right. I think today we are still in need of children's advocates, like Korczak was. Korczak always took children's side. And we do have some worries, nowadays worries. Our environment, that's what Christopher said. Is it still for play, or do they have any time and place and space to play? Our schools, our economical goals that we want to attain with schooling, really serving children's well-being? We have to doubt about it. Our families, divorces and newly composed families. I know children are really not very well off in that kind of families, even though I don't have any answers. But I know that children really suffer. Adults' attitudes toward children, do we really give children a voice? Today's conference is about this issue. So I would like to show to you, this is Theo's presentation, and there is another one. So, that was mine. This one? Yes, there we go. We would like to go to this Korczak pedagogy of listening. On the camp, I told you, he said, I really learned not to talk to, but to talk with children. So let's see how hard it is to talk with instead of to children. I tell you it is. Watch this. I would like you to watch this video, and I would like you to watch it carefully, but mainly take children's position, take children's perspective. That's a special way of watching. I would like you to do that. See what happens.
Usually we sit in a circle and put our feet. Do you want to do that today? You don't want to do that because we're sitting in a half circle. Okay. Good morning. Good morning, dear. Good morning to Rhino. And how do you do? Good morning to Abby. And how do you do? Good morning to Lena. And how do you do? Good morning tomorrow. And how do you do? Good morning to Izzy. And how do you do? Are you ready? Good morning to Cassie, and how do you do? Little baby bumblebee. Good morning to Cassie, and how do you do? Byron, little baby bumblebee, won't you say your name for me? What's your name? What's your name? Very good, go sit down. Back in your seat. Little baby bumblebee, won't you say your name for me? What's your name? Very good, little baby bumblebee, won't you say your name for me? What's your name? Little baby bumblebee, won't you spell your name for me? Spell your name. Okay, what's your name? And how do you spell it? Isaac. And how, little baby bumblebee, won't you spell your name for me? Spell your name.
Okay, I think we should continue just because it's kind of late, getting late. Okay, this is interaction with children. What's the problem? Oh, don't you see any?
She asked, I think, to spell the names. They had to spell the names. They are too young to ask that question.
Yeah, and then she continues, I didn't show that part, with she's singing the names of the day, etc. Yeah. So what's the problem with that?
She shouldn't ask it.
Because they're too young.
They're too young, I would think.
She would probably say, yeah, but they're going to do something at least. And the problem, I think, is, let me see, there's something out of balance here. Exactly. The balance between a child's purpose and the adult's purpose. And that's something we do a lot. We have our purpose, we think, oh, we want to teach children to spell their names, we want to teach them the days of the week, and listen to the children and watch the children. There's one that's sitting like, okay, the ball attracts her a little bit. 4. Great job, Alex. You see, Amy, that's how this be done. Now that's Romelia. Someone else who knows? Sit down. What do you think will happen when we all start running, huh? The capital of Belgium is Wrong! Okay, so the fill-in questions. And for children, all this is not very respectful to them, because you don't say this to adults, do you? I hope you don't. Give her an applause. I give Theo an applause. He was very good, wasn't he? When I say, Theo, this was very good, I tell him, it's my standards and you meet my standards. I can say I was impressed, Theo. Thank you. I even, you know, after hearing this story so many times, I think you still made it vivid for me. So I can tell something about myself, but when I compliment him, it's like it's my standards and I'm above you, far above you. And that's not very respectful. So what should we avoid? Judging and complimenting. Whoops. When I ask my students, try that. and I ask you in a minute to do that. You know, that's difficult. Commanding. Or that's what's on your mind. In short, try to avoid a teacher's attitude. I'm sorry, but exactly that is the teaching situation in many situations in school. And I always say, don't do that. Indeed, be more equal with children, try to be there. We do not stand opposite, but we try to stand next to children. Korczak talking with a boy who had been fighting a lot the week before. How many times, he asked, have you been fighting? The boy said, I think 20 times. Oops. What is your intention, Korczak asked, for next week? And the boy says, well, not to fight anymore. And most adults would be happy. Korczak wasn't. He said, that's maybe too ambitious. How about trying to fight only 10 times? That's particularly Korczak. He was next to the child. He knew this child had all kinds of situations which made him a little bit aggressive. And so Korczak understood, and he tried to help him to help himself. That's the attitude. Above them or on equal level. That's how we should try to reflect on ourselves. Now, I want you to check this. This is a girl, and she has this popping up things with plastic, you know that probably. What to say when I tell you, okay, don't judge. Not all very good, or no, you should do it differently. Compliment or judgment are not done, so what do we do? Look, Miss Lillian, what I can. First, I help you a little bit. Here she, so you have to look what she can. Watch that picture. And so, what did Mr. Tom say? I see you discovered to make sounds by flapping the plastic bubble with your hand. I see that. No compliments, no judgment. And then she says, because if you do that, you encourage a child much more than saying, oh, very good. You encourage the child to continue discovering, because you have no judgment, and that makes a child feel more free, indeed. So what does the child do? Well, she said, this, I can also make them plop by stamping. Oh yes, I hear them, plop, plop. I wonder if the sound will be louder when you jump higher. You can do that. Encourage some more experiments. So here we have the next situation, and then it's up to you. Look, Tom, I make all kinds of shapes. Look, I will show you. And here she goes. So what does Tom do? Ah, you use your fingers to hold the plastic circle in position, and then you draw around it. I see, you really have to concentrate to do it right. You see, you encourage the effort. Not you are good, not the situation is all right, what you created. I see, you have to concentrate to do that right. And then she says, I can also do it with different shapes. Okay, you try it. I would like to show you something, Master. When I pull out the wire, the car stops, and when I put it back in, the car starts racing again. What do we do? Who has an idea? You see here what he's doing on the right picture. Who has an idea? What would you do? You cannot say, all right, good boy, good girl. No, no, no. That's not very respectful.
You discovered
huh?
energy. You discovered energy.
You discovered energy, yes. Can you be more precise? Can you be more precise?
Yeah, you discovered when you take out the blood, the energy falls away, and when you put it in, the energy is back. So
exactly. You describe the situation, and it is, well, this Tom was a little bit more specific, but it's about to say, I see you interrupted the electrical circle. That's what you did. When you pulled out the wire, and now you close it again when you put it back. Yeah, I see it. Well, so it's describing what you see the child do, and it helps a lot for the child to reflect on what he did. Okay, The last situation, and then I give the floor to anyone else who wants. Look, Miss Helma, what I made. Now she showed it a little bit better because you really have to look. So, what can we say? Anyone? Brioni. I know your name, so.
Yeah. Oh, there are quite some red points there in your painting, and
Yeah.
can I see it well? Is it like a little man who is laughing?
Okay, you mean this one here?
Yeah.
That's a real
I
smile.
had to be. It was about the first thing. Yeah.
This one.
Yeah, I was talking about the right picture.
Okay. Okay, this one she made, and here you see it a little bit better. That's what she made. You see the pair of scissors she uses? It's a zigzag thing, eh? So anyway, there's a lot to say about this work. They have the dots here, and the smile, you said? Yeah. Anything more we see?
You put some glue on it?
You put some glue on it, probably, yes? Yeah. Okay, let me see what the teacher said. You made all those shapes by cutting them with a zigzag scissor. Okay, and you used glue to make them stick. That certainly was a lot of work, wasn't it? And then he made a remark, which is maybe you see it also. It seems like these two shapes look at each other in the mirror. And then the girl says, a funny mirror. Yeah. So, just some of the many, many lessons of Janusz Korczak, because I can tell you, of course, implications can be never introduce or implement any educational change without asking children, or start a parliament. Maybe you should start that tutorship, what also Korczak did, but no, or newspaper. No, the idea is, Korczak said, don't imitate me, reflect on who you are. What we try to do today is tell you how important it is, your attitude. Do you really take them seriously? For myself, I have to tell you that all the time I read about Korczak and I read his books, anytime he tells me again and again, I thought I took them seriously, but Korczak really did. So I hope that those kind of lessons take children seriously, be realistic, be really interested in what goes on in their minds. It takes a real effort for adults to understand children. Help them to develop their own knowledge and not always bring them in a teacher situation. I know it and now you have to tell me. That was one of the children also, what's your name? She looked at the teacher. For me, you don't know my name. Okay, yes, and real. So, what we would like to tell you about Korczak is he taught us really to give children a voice. And that was the name of this conference. So. That's it.
If you want to read more about the life and especially all the works of Father Korczak, it can help you. Downstairs is a table, our table, Korczak table. There's a paper, and if you write there your name and email address, you will receive 6 times a year, just for free, our bulletin with conferences, new publications, invitations, etc., etc. It's very useful. So just fill your name and email address, and that's all. We have a little leaflet that is Korczak inspiration for people who work in the primary school. You can, if you write this also your name in the, we can send you this brochure. Unfortunately, we forgot to take a lot of them. So, but just write down your name, and we will follow you.
Just a question, Theo, how many members do you have in the Netherlands?
We have in the Netherlands 300 members, volunteers, and they pay a little money every year. Not enough. Not enough. But if we have a big activity, like a children's camp or a conference, we find sponsors.
Good.
But we have now also in Belgium a very active Korczak Association, and if you want to know the email address and the name of the chairman, the president of the Janusz Korczak Association in Belgium, this Mr. Romain Wilpia, we can also give you this information, but we send it if we have your email address.
Heard you call, give me a voice, give me the space.